Welcome back to the Jameson Files. I'm your host, Carrie Weber. Dr. Randy Middleton of Dallas, Texas. Dr. Middleton, thank you so much for joining me today. Dr. Randy Middleton is an endodontist in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and has started a new company called EndoConnect. And he is on a mission to help make the referral process of the endo needs in a general practice as easy as possible by providing a service that makes that in-house for the general practices. And so, Dr. Middleton, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your services through EndoConnect. But before we do that, let's back up a little bit. And would you mind telling the listeners and viewers a little bit about your backstory? What led you to endodontics and what ultimately led you to the path that you're on today in your professional career?
So I found endodontics actually in dental school. It was something I was drawn to, just, the actual work itself, the meticulous nature of doing the actual procedures attracted me. And so I just kind of ran from it from there. And then, just kind of thinking through, that was probably second or third year in dental school. So I had a lot of time to reflect on how does practice life look, and
Right.
it never seemed right to me to duplicate everything that a general dentist has. An office, the chairs, the staff, the everything is literally a carbon copy, but down the street, and it just didn't seem right. And I thought there's got to be a
Right.
better way for this. And patients don't like traveling. It's hard to collaborate on cases when you're down the street, and so I always thought this would be something I did, and it's just slowly kind of building, and it looks like it's going to happen. So I'm excited for the future.
It's so exciting. Up until this point, for some time, you've been doing this on your own. You've been providing this where you go into the practices, you bring your assistants, you bring all of the equipment that you need, and you basically are collaborating and partnering with these practices, providing your endodontic services, however many days a month that they need you there, correct?
That's right. Yeah, and it's interesting that it can grow organically. Just vendors and
Right.
assistants and dentists. They just everybody knows 10 more people, and it's really grown bigger than I thought it would, without a whole lot of advertising, at least so far.
Yes, and what's curious to me is when this started taking off, did you know? I mean, had you known about this model before, or is this something that you took the lead on and said, "Why don't I just come to you?" How did this really begin?
Well, I mean, I kind of conceptualized it in, like, loosely, in dental school, then residency, and then actually was connected with a DSO, which this is their model. And I thought, well,
Mm.
let me just link up with them. And then, as I kind of got my footing there, learned, the business side of it, things that I like, things that I can do better. And then it just kind of grew in parallel. It started, like I said, with vendors, and I found connections through hygienists that I've met, and it's, just everybody, word of mouth it's very powerful.
Yes, that leads me to something kind of interesting because you said just a minute ago, for you, I mean, this has really started pretty organically for you. Made one connection, and then the word got out about you and that this was something that you would provide. And you had mentioned that to this point it's been organic, but you're definitely, the way that we really know each other is you definitely are a forward thinker in terms of all aspects of marketing your business. I mean, you really do put your own effort forward to help that word of mouth marketing grow, but also you're investing in your own marketing efforts, and you've been trying to do that since I've met you. So, how do you see marketing in terms of its role that it plays in your career in this particular approach to endodontics that you're taking?
Word of mouth isn't direct. You can't control where that goes, and I like that I can control where I'm marketing the practice. It's so that's really the onus of, number one, to scale the practice, but also to be able to direct it geographically in certain areas, and that's a lot more easily controlled with formal marketing. And so
Right.
that's what drove me to the formal marketing campaigns.
Really a matter of being able to direct the message that you want to get out there, because it is a very specific process of how you work with these practices. So I'm sure there's a piece of it that's, I need to make sure they understand what this is all about and what we do. Would you agree?
It's a different practice type. A lot of practices have never heard of it. And with a formal marketing, I'm going to call it a campaign. That's not my area of expertise. I'm not a marketer.
Right.
I kind of have a loose vision, but I don't know the psychology of, how does a flyer need to look? How does my website need to flow? And so that's what led me to find a professional that does this. So I
Yes.
don't pretend to be, an expert in marketing. So, I'll just stay in my lane of
You have
endodontics and
you
I'll
have your expertise, right? You know
just,
what your expertise is. So let's talk about your expertise, endodontics. Interestingly, in 2024, I've been doing some work more specifically in specialties. And so something that's very unique about endo is there's not very many of you out there. You are one of the lowest represented specialties nationwide, which could lead to definitely the demand that you of what you provide. But what do you see that as in terms of what you all bring to the profession and bring to patient care? Why do you think there's so few people that choose the endo path?
I don't know if too few people choose it. I think there's just not a lot of programs. I mean, it's highly competitive, so I don't think there's any
Mhm.
programs that aren't full. I think the interest is there. I think this is an attractive specialty to a lot of dentists. I just think,
Yeah.
I don't know why we don't have enough specialists, but I don't think it's a lack of interest.
Well, and it's interesting because it seems as if, this is one of those pieces, especially complex endo cases are one of the items that the GPs are like, can I pass this off to somebody else? Or,
Yeah, no,
and
that's
so
never it.
yeah, and that's what brings you to the table. So what would you say for those that are considering endodontics or those younger doctors that are just getting started in endo? What kind of advice would you give them that you've learned at this point in your career as an endodontist that would really help them thrive in this specialty?
I think, just viewing the specialist as a partner to the practice. So, and it doesn't
Mm,
have to be in my model, it can be in the traditional model, but, really the goal is we are partnering with them to take care of this patient. And so
yes,
whatever that looks like for that practice and, specialists and dentists together. But the more that I lean into the partnership aspect, the better we collaborate together. And I think the patient feels that, the seamless, transition when the care is passed from the general dentist to the specialist that, we all know what's going on. And so I think that makes
yes.
everybody look competent and the patient feels even that much more comfortable with us.
That's really the ideal piece about what you're doing is it really puts the emphasis on a partnership, a true
Mhm,
collaborative relationship for the sake of the patient. This feels like a good time to share a little bit more specifically. So EndoConnect is your company that's really this creating this community of partnership with GPs and endodontists,
mhm.
yourself included, going into the general practices and providing that endodontic care. Can you give a little bit more of a deep dive description of what does that look like? What is a relationship between the partnership with a practice and with you and your company? How is that how is that realized? What's that look like?
So from the day to day, an office would traditionally send their patients to the office down the street. Well, they don't do that anymore. They schedule them in their own office on a day of their choosing, and based on their volume, we'll come in and we'll see their patients, morning, an afternoon, all day, how many ever they need seen at whatever frequency is good for them. So the patient never really knows of this, relationship behind the scenes, but all they know is they go to the same office. They have a procedure done by a new dentist, but one that their dentist is endorsing because it's in their office. And most of them will get their final restorations right after the endodontic procedure. So they're not running around in a temporary crown. They're not driving across town. So it's just from the patient's perspective, it's seamless,
Yes.
and really the relationship on the backside is it's not complex. They bring us in, we charge them a fee for, every procedure that we do, and then they bill their patients as they normally would. So it really works well. And there's not a lot of, I think that the idea of it seems intimidating, but in practice, the offices seem to be able to integrate it quickly, easily. The front desk staffs, they don't change much of what they're doing. They just add a new column, for the endo day, and
Yes.
it seems to be pretty smooth once we get past kind of the mental hurdles of having a new provider in the office.
Yes. Because to me, it's brilliant. I mean, to me, it answers such a high level of customer service for the patient, just as you said, the convenience factor. And we know that time is one of the biggest obstacles for care for patients. So to me, that convenience and the time saving is so huge. Plus, for the patient, they don't have to go somewhere new and strange. They can go to the place that they're most familiar and comfortable.
Mhm.
And then also in terms of the comfort level for the actual practices, they get to schedule, they get to do, the financial arrangements, they get to care for that patient and lead that patient through treatment like they would any patient in any treatment. The only difference is it's an endodontist that comes in and provides that actual treatment. I think that's just such a brilliant way to be able to make it seamless for the practice and also a very seamless and positive experience for the patient. I have to imagine that's what you experience on a regular basis. Is it?
Yeah, I mean, patients really do appreciate not having to be sitting down the street. Every office that we connect with says, my patients don't, they just beg me, please don't send me, just, can you not do this? And, and sometimes the case is just not, not a good case for the dentist to do. So, they're stuck between, do I attempt this thing or do I send the patient down the street? And so, bringing that into their office is, seems like a no brainer. I mean, it's a win-win for
Uh,
everybody.
I was telling you before we got on here, I just need you to go nationwide, Dr. Middleton. I
We're,
I need
we're
you
working on,
in many,
we're
many
working on
states. So you're working on it for sure. So tell me, for those of you that, especially any listeners or viewers that are in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, which is where you are based, and where your services are provided right now. Tell everyone how they can find you, how they can learn more about EndoConnect, and if they're curious or want to take any next steps in connecting with you.
it's endoconnect.net. Browse there. It has pretty much everything, the ins and outs. They can get, 80% of the information of how we work, what they can expect. All that's on the website. If they want to connect, they can fill out a form, and somebody will be in contact with them. Would love to connect.
Perfect. And so all you Dallas Fort Worth people, make a point to go visit endoconnect.net, get to know Dr. Middleton and his team, and explore this as a new opportunity for you to not only take care of your patients, but have a new productive entity in your practice that serves both you and your patients to the highest possible level. So, Dr. Middleton, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for listening. We appreciate you being a part of our community, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Jameson Files. Visit us online at jmsn.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Spotify. See you next time.